Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Loki. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're literally picking up right after the last episode, and our variant finds her way to the TVA. Well, in actuality, that's not even where we start. We actually start with her, like, that commander, like, who she got the information from. Like, we see her being like, oh, hey, we're besties getting drinks. I'm like, that's actually really messed up. It's like, I was like, oh, so that's how you're doing it. You're literally getting inside of her mind. And even later on, when she starts realizing things, I don't know, because she's like, oh, you know, brain freeze. It's like, oh, yeah, it goes from the top of your mouth and literally freezes its synapses. So it kind of freezes a memory in place or something like that. So let's try it. And it's like, okay. And it's like, and how many people guard the timekeepers? And she's like, wait, what? And it's like, she's like, I recognize this place. I don't recognize you. So basically, and she explains it later on, it is a real memory. She just, like, it's most likely that was someone, either she took a real memory and created herself into it and kind of wrote the dialogue for things to kind of go out the way they did, or it's supposed to be a real memory in the sense that, like, that exact conversation and moment happened, she just replaced the person that was in the memory. It makes you wonder just how much of it is, like, fantasized that she created, and how much of it is just like, nah, let me just swap myself in for whoever's actually here. It's really interesting development, but it's, like, interesting to know that's how she got the information. But going back to her busting into the TVA, what I appreciate is she tried to enchant one of them and it didn't work. I was like, interesting, because she says that she's been planning this for years, and I think that speaks volumes. Like, there's no way you can account, no matter how much planning you have, you can never account for what you don't know. And she didn't know going into that at the TVA you can't use your powers, or in particular magic, is a no-no. And it's like, granted, didn't mean anything. Like, Loki's kind of going hand-to-hand combat-wise, like, in the past. Like, mainly you see it in Ragnarok and Dark World, but it's still so interesting to be like, just see her, like, this variant, like, do that. It's like, oh, wow. And then even seeing Loki go hand-to-hand in this is, like, pretty interesting to see, like, that side of him. Because more often than not, he's usually, like, well, for what, he usually has a weapon in hand, but also, like, he usually uses his magic. So it's just, I mean, to be fair, it's been a little while since I even seen Dark World and Ragnarok, so I might not be remembering clearly. There might be moments where, like, no, he's done hand-to-hand before, but it's just like, this show has definitely showcased it a lot more than I feel like the movies have. But that, like I said, that could just be me remembering things wrong. I feel so bad for those poor bastards, because each and every one of them is getting, like, she's grabbing the staff and, like, she's pruning them. I mean, we heard a few arm breaks throughout the course of this episode. It's like, oh, that's gotta suck. But she makes it to that elevator, and Loki shows up. Once again, time is so funny, because he did follow behind her a couple seconds, so she got a little bit of a lead upon him. So, but he made sure he knew exactly where his daggers were, came to arm, and it's like him and her. I also think it's so fascinating. She uses a sword when it almost look, it's not, but it almost looked like a scimitar. I don't think it was, but it's just interesting. She uses a sword. He sticks to the daggers, and he's kind of like, all right, we don't even have to do this. We don't have to do the whole killing each other thing. It's like, we could actually work together. She's not interested. And then Renslayer shows up. So, and Loki ends up getting them out of there. He ends up using a temportal device to, like, teleport them somewhere else. And it's like, all right, you know, it's either we could stay here and we could kill each other. And it's like, wait, where did you send us? And they're on Lamentis 2077. Well, Lamentis 2077. So I'm wondering, is that supposed to be like, to say it, well, it's a moon. So I'm assuming it's like, right, I guess it's like different Lamentises. Like, oh, there's Lamentis 1, here's Lamentis 2, which is so interesting to think about that. Because, like, isn't it Jupiter that's the planet that has the moons and stuff like that? I think each one of its moons has a different name. Once again, I'm not in, like, well versed in all the space stuff. So, but I think they all have different names. The moons. So because we have the moon, you know. So it's just interesting to think about. But it's like, yeah, it said Lamentis 1, and I'm like, I don't know whether that's supposed to mean, like, something replaces it later on, or like I said, like, oh, this place has, like, that particular planet has, like, multiple moons, and Lamentis is, like, the name of all the moons. So this is Moon 1 Lamentis, and that's Moon 2 Lamentis. Regardless, it's not important, but still, year 2077, basically, it was one of the apocalypses that the variant had locked into place. So it's like, right, Loki, using his magic, was able to kind of make it vanish, which once again showcases each of the Lokis do have different abilities, because the moment Loki did that, she's like, what did you do with it? It's like, she doesn't know how his powers works, much like he didn't know how hers worked. So yeah, there's some overlap in certain cases, but what Loki can do, it doesn't seem like she can do, because later on, because they're not in the TVA anymore, he uses his magic, he ends up teleporting behind her. It's like, she didn't see that coming, and we see throughout the episode, she can't do it. So we only, like, the main ability we see her do is the enchantment, so I don't know whether that's just her natural go-to ability, or does she not have anything beyond that. Like, it seems like, I mean, maybe it does apply to other Lokis, but he seems like the one, at least this version, is definitely proficient in other forms of magic. It seems like enchantment's kind of like I said, if it's not just her go-to, it seems like it might be the only magic she has access to, which is interesting to think about. I mean, that plays into, like, this multiverse thing of so well, of, like, right, just, like, how very different characters can be. We even kind of learn about that a little more later on, but, I mean, especially as they spent more time together, she's like, don't call me Loki, I'm Sophie. It's like, it's an alias, but it's also interesting to know, like, she abandoned the name Loki. Why? We don't know. We learned a little bit about her this episode, but there's still so much we don't know about her. Which is interesting, but he's the one to kind of like slow down, we'll work together. She's all, it's because he's more like sly backstabby. She's kind of sly backstabby, but she's also very like brute force. It's kind of like whatever the thing is, he's the one that's like, oh, I'll find a sneaky way around it. Like later on when it's like, okay, we got to get to that lady's place because they're trying to find a place to power their device because it's running low. And once again, it's like, they're both Lokis, so that neither one can be trusted. It's like, oh, Loki's like, oh, maybe we can use this sign to power. It's like, oh, she's like, good. Yeah, give me the device so I can power it. He's like, I'm not going to fall for that. And she's like, yeah, if you were really the tech person, you know we need a big energy source, not from this energy from this sign. So it's like, it's like two people who can't trust each other. It's a very like, because this is kind of almost police drama-esque, because he is technical, a consultant for the police and stuff. It plays into that cat mouse thing of kind of like, you know, the hero and the villain kind of having to work together on occasion. It's like, right, we're kind of both stuck in this terrible situation on the way out of this. We work together. It's not just necessarily a superhero thing. There's plenty of stories that do that cat and mouse having to work together thing. But it's just so fascinating of like, right, neither one of us can trust the other because we're both sneaky bastards. It's kind of how you can just chalk that up to. But they ran into that lady's house and like, Sophie just busted in, like I said, brute force, got blasted. Loki's like, oh no, actually I enjoyed that too. It's like, the fact is, you know, and try to pretend to be like that lady's husband or whatever, and he's like, oh, I've missed you so much. He gets blasted too, so it's like, right, neither one of you is as good as you think you are. And she's like, oh, now what was all that about? He's like, just stop it, don't say anything, just almost like, just shut up, you know? And it's like, right, she's staying behind, but basically there is an arc that's basically shuttling everyone off Lamentis. But she was saying like, oh, you don't have a ticket. It's not going to be easy to get one. The sad thing is the moment they were saying that, I'm like, she is staying behind. So maybe it's just because like she's like, I'm not going to be able to get on board, so I don't care. Or it might be a situation where she doesn't care to get off the planet anyway. It's really actually heartbreaking when we get into like knowing like, right, like last apocalypse, it's like, right, here's something where like all these people inside this rock cart are gonna all die, and also knowing that like everyone on Lamentis is gonna die. It's actually really heartbreaking. So, but obviously it's like, all right, we can't just like force our way in. So I love Loki puts on like a guard disguise and he's like, how do I look? And she's like this is a shit idea or something like that. And I love that he's putting on his voice like, oh yeah, like, I'm told to get her aboard. Because, and it's even sadder too, like, they kind of move on with the episode, but let's not forget, like, literally in the background, you have people being like, come on, we need to get on this train. Like, you're not letting women and children on. The fact is, only the rich are allowed to get on the train. So it actually took a combination of Sylvie and Loki to get on the train. His disguise as a guard and her enchantment to get them on. But, they do kind of, you know, sit down. I love him being like, oh, I can't go backwards on a train. And she's like, I don't turn my back on a train. He's like, wait, what? And she says, I don't do it. She says, sit down. They have like little weird things. Even being like, I can't fall asleep. He's like, wait. He's like, you can't fall asleep on a train? And she's like, no, I can't fall asleep around someone I get trust. She's like, but if you're tired, you go ahead. And goes, he's like, no, I'm good. Like I can really trust you. But this is where we get into the really, really interesting, like, continued conversation about the multiverse and stuff like that, showing you the differences between them. Like, Loki learned magic, obviously, from his mom, you know, and it's like, it's like, oh, was that your biological? It's like, no, I found out. It's actually, he's like, no, that's not my biological mom. I was adopted. She's like, I know. And she's like, it's like, oh, so they told you. Yeah, when I was young. He's like, wait, they told you when you were young? It's like, yeah. He's like, they told me, but like well after the fact. And once again, showing you the differences of like, maybe that's why she is the way she is, because Loki has a lot of resentment because he grew up not knowing. Like, obviously that's what sets him off in Thor, borderlining Avengers is like, right, what? I had this truth hidden from me the entire time. He's always been a mischievous scamp that he is, but it is more so like he resented his family a lot because like, well, you've been lying to me my entire life, not telling me about who my real family is. But to know like Sylvie, she's known her entire life. It's also that her mom is dead. Both of their moms are dead. Technically his isn't, but it's like, it's an inevitability because it's like, right, every version of you eventually, I mean, that we're aware of, it almost seems like it's probably an inevitability that your mom is going to die in some shape or form. In her case, it's like her mom died when she was young. Loki, obviously, when he was older, but he's responsible for his mom's death. Didn't bring that up conversation-wise, you know, because I'm curious how Sylvie would have reacted to that. But it's like, he has enough memories of his mom. It's like, you know, she's the one that taught him magic. He was like, I remember her like making fireworks all over the place and like I being astounded, like, oh, that's so amazing. But it's like, she told me I could do it. Like, she was the type of person you wanted to believe in you. You know, that she believed that you could do anything, you know? And saying like, oh, she sounds like an amazing person. He was like, she was, you know? But yeah, that was just interesting. We didn't get into the conversation about like some other differences because I'm curious, like, is Thor her brother in that world or not? Like, what? I'm that type of person. I'm like, I need to know. Maybe we'll get some deets in the future, but I'm like, I need to know like a lot of the differences because this is our first time really getting that. Like, you know, what are the differences? Because this version of Loki that we're following is, well, if given a chance, like his life would have gone exactly the same way. Well, granted, he kind of branched out when he sold the Tesseract, so he went down a different path. So it wouldn't have been a one-for-one for the Loki that we've been following, but a general enough idea we know what future he held for him, just aside from being a variant. What is this Loki's future? What was her life going to be like, even besides just being a variant? Like, what would it have been? You know what I'm saying? Like, if they were just kind of able to run their life, so they're able to just run their course, like... It's just interesting to know, like, even from an early point in your life, like, your life diverges so much. I mean, to be fair, that's the beauty of, like, the multiverse and, like, alternate timelines. Like, every choice you make creates a new timeline. You know, deciding to go left instead of going right. Whether to sleep in and go to, or where you actually went to work on time. Being late for work or showing up on time. Like, every little choice can branch out into many different ways, you know. And you never know what the butterfly effect is going to be in the long run. It's fascinating. But Loki, you know, is going to pass the time his way, and it's so interesting because Thor is always seen as like the bro-ish god of like, oh, let's party it up, him and his buds. But to see Loki kind of like that and singing like, you know, and it's Guardian song like that's actually pretty dope. Because we've never seen him be the partier. That's always been Thor. So to see him kind of cut loose like that a little bit and get a little drunk. And he's like, no, I'm not drunk. I'm just getting filled. He's like, now, truth be told is, I am full. But then he was like, before he couldn't remember, like he was trying to create like a metaphor for love. And he's like, love is like a dagger. And honestly, in a weird way, there was actually like some very like poetic beauty. I'm going to butcher like a lot of like paraphrasing it. But his notion of love, it was actually beautiful and like very poetic, like very almost Shakespearean, that like love is like a dagger. It can be held, it can be wielded so close and also far away. And that basically it can make you bleed or something like that. Like I said, I'm butchering it. And then like Sophie tried to grab it and he makes it disappear. And she's like, so love is like an imaginary dagger. And he was like, that didn't work. And she was like, no, it didn't. He's like, man, I thought I nailed it with that. What was it that she said earlier? She said some remark and then Loki's like, oh, wait. Let me write that down. He pulls out a quill and a piece of paper. Now, what was it you said again? Was it like love is hate or something like that? And she's like, shut up. And look at you trying to be cute. They were actually interestingly hitting it off. And part of me was like, is that a little too masturbatory to like hook up with like a different version of yourself? Because I was like, I mean, it's interesting because it's like no one can understand Loki better than Loki. You know, it's like here's another version of yourself that it's like, oh, like no one can understand me, can see the world kind of the same way I do. Granted, they have very different visions of the world, because he's even like, wait, what kind of Loki are you? You were going to like disrupt the TVA, like that was your main plan, and you're gonna walk away? And she's like, yeah. He's like, no, no Loki would ever do that. That's so, for him, it's like, that's so asinine. Like, of course, like every other Loki would take that opportunity except for you. I'm assuming it's like whatever happened in her life made her decide like, no, I'm not in this to rule. Like, she's all about the dedication. She's like very like mission focused, which Loki can be, but in this particular case, he's not. And I think the reason is because before he had in his mind, he had glorious purpose, but now he doesn't. He's lost his purpose because it's like, right, he blindly is kind of bumbling his way towards like what he believes could be his new glorious purpose, and that's like kind of taking over the TVA. But it's like, because for him, he knows his entire life is written out. He knows where it ends, you know. That, you know, once again, he's just a side character, that his purpose in life is literally just to make other people better, make better versions of themselves. So it's like, right, I'm just meant to make my brother better, and I'm meant to make the Avengers who they are. Like, they literally came together because of me. So that's that's all I, like, my claim of glory, essentially, you know? So he's kind of submitted to, like, the notion that, like, right, you can't beat this power. Like, that's why he's kind of given up to a certain extent, because it's like, what's the point? The TVA, this is power next level. This is power that makes the Infinity Stones just paperweight. This is real power. This is the most powerful power in the universe that we know of, because we have no idea where the MCU is going. We have no idea what this TVA thing's going to be. So at the end of the day, for now, this seems like the great and awesome power, but over this course of the episode, we do kind of see and learn that there are cracks to it. We'll get to that soon enough. But the fact is, Loki was so drunk, he got rid of his disguise, and he's just in his variant outfit, and he draws attention. And him and Sylvie proceed to get some fighting done. And it's, once again, it's so dope. Them doing their thing. I even love Loki at one point in time lining up the dagger, and he throws it, and she was like, that was a terrible throw. And she's like, he's drunk, so he missed. Kicking the dude out the window, then eventually getting thrown out the window himself, but Sylvie has to go with him because it's like, right, he has the device. Sadly, the landing was pretty rough, and he ended up breaking the device. And Sylvie's so frustrated, just lets out a scream of power, and he's like, oh, did that scream make you feel better? It immediately made me think of Dark World when he found out his mom was dead and Thor came to check on him, and like Loki's like acting like everything's fine. He's like, you can drop the guy's brother, and then he dropped the illusion, and everything in the room was broken. He was devastated by their mom's death, you know. So especially knowing that he kind of played a role in it, so it kind of kind of screamed out of frustration, reminded me of that. Because that's one of the few times we ever got to see Loki, like, not like his usually calm, cool, and collected self. Like, he's always he acts like he's so in control. So that moment with this Loki's never had that moment. So it was interesting. Like, you know, part of me wonders, did they craft that moment specifically? Because as the audience, you'd be like, okay, you'd associate it with Dark World in that regard. But, we end up finding out that, like, this whole world is doomed, and they're kind of doomed too, because no one gets off Lamentis. Even the Ark doesn't get off Lamentis. Like, even it ends up getting destroyed, so they don't. But Loki's like, hey, if we get up there, like, this, you know, apocalypse, this timeline and everything didn't have us there to steal the ship, so we steal it, we potentially get off. Which is also interesting, because inadvertently that would mean you'd end up saving people's lives. Granted, it's not their main mission, but at the very least, it'd be kind of like a, interesting notion, I think. Would be interesting to know. Like, it's more so about self-preservation, but they'd be saving people in the process, so I doubt they'd go through the trouble of, like, kicking everyone off. It's like, right, whoever manages to get on before we get off the Lamentis, so. But as they're walking, and, you know, Loki's asking about the enchantment, how it works and everything, because it's like, right, you know so much about me, I know so little about you. But basically she talks about, and I was talking about it earlier, like with the enchantment, she basically has to make physical contact, and she basically has to grab onto their mind. And weaker minds, it makes it easier to take control of. tougher mind, she has to, you know, warp it into a fantasy, like she did that commander, to get what she wants, you know? And it's like, oh, that woman, that commander, her mind was so messed up. I mean, I had to go back 100 years, you know, back her regular life. And he was like, wait, what? 100 years? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, when she lived on Earth, she was a normal person. He's like, no. I was told that the timekeepers made everyone. She's like, no, that's wrong. It's like, they're all like us, variants. I was like, whoa! Because the MCU crew, if you don't know, it's a podcast, they talked about that. That was a running theory that everyone, because their big question was, why was it that this particular person, the commander, like, why would she know where the timekeepers are when in actuality no one else does? Mobius made it clear last episode he never actually met with the timekeepers, which begs the question, has Renslayer the judge, like, has she ever met them? Or does she believe she has? Like, this is where everything starts cracking about the TVA. That's so interesting, because it also adds a layer of, like, for one, it's like, oh, they made it seem like Loki, a variant, tracking down another variant was such a genius idea, when in actuality, it's like, no, they are all variants hunting other variants. They just didn't know that. That's actually so sad. And if that truth ever came out, like, it would break everyone, because it's like, wait, I'm a variant, then we need to be destroyed. It's like, so is the plan, like, is this like an endless cycle of, like, you know, because Mobius is under the impression, like, when the timekeepers finish, like threading everything into one final sacred timeline again, like, keep everything in line, prevent all the, like, branching timelines, we'll meet at the end of it all, and kind of there'll be peace and everything. But it's like, that's why I brought that up before, like, how do you do that when literally everyone's choices affect and spin off into other timelines? Like, how do you keep things going the way you want them to? So does that mean, like, everything they know about these branching timelines is BS? Like, maybe that's just, like, maybe it's busy work. I have no idea, like, what the end result is, what the end goal is into that. And it's like, you know, because it brings everything into question, because that means everything we've come to know about the TVA, figured as much, but still, like, to know, like, in episode 3 that everything was a lie, it leads to so many questions then about, you know, I mean, because I start kind of getting a little suspicious. I'm like, do you think Mobius is full of BS? Do you think he actually knows a lot more? Because this actually was in the MCU crew's, like, whole thing about, like, the fact is that Mobius is so obsessed with the 90s, specifically ski jets. The fact is he's so obsessed with them is probably potentially saying that that's what time he's from. He's from, like, the 90s or whatever. That very why he's like, oh yeah, that's such a specific year where everything was okay. It was like, what, 90-something? Because that's the year he's from. Because she said it, Sylvie said it herself. You have to, like, she had to go back through, like, 100 years of memory. So I'm like, whoa, okay. So Mobius made it clear in the first episode, time works differently at the TVA. So are we doing, like, DBZ hyperbolic time chamber rules, where, like, an hour on the outside of the hour in the hyperbolic time chamber is like a day outside? Are we working with those rules, or is it that time is completely frozen? I would assume it's more, you know, or does the quote unquote timekeepers or whoever's really behind the TVA, are they able to, like, make people immortal? Like, because that's saying, like, these aren't variants that, like, oh, it's not like that commander was replaced by a different variant. It's like, it's the same variant who had hundreds of years of memory. So it means she's been consistently there. So, like I said, time work. Like, I'm assuming it's hyperbolic time chamber rules type of thing. Maybe. I mean, it'd probably be more so inverse of that. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking about it too much, because I'm like, no. Well, yeah, because that could be the case. Well, because it'd probably be more so like, maybe because the way time isn't so, what's the word I'm looking for? I was about to say, time isn't the straight line people make it out to be, or at least is being presented in this case, or maybe it actually is, I don't know. Because most time travel stuff would say, like, no, time isn't, like, a straight line. It's kind of curvy. Jeremy Bearimy, if we're going by, if I remember correctly, that's, from The Good Place. Like, if it's, you know, it's a Jeremy Bearimy, it's you know, what time actually is. So, I don't know. Like I said, it begs a lot of questions. Like I said, I'm thinking about it too much, but, I mean, makes you wonder, like, how, like, who's the oldest of the variants? Is it the judge? I mean, that's also a thing, too. Like, is she a variant? Or is she not? Like, because it also showcases, like, right, their mind is so scattered and cloudy. Like, oh, the reason why the commander was, like, she was just saying that over and over again, because it was, like, her mind had been cleared for the first time. Basically, Selphie broke through the haze, so every one of them is basically under a spell, which has been a theory that kind of the MCU crew has kind of thrown out there, that maybe this is kind of that, like, oh, like, almost a snake eating its tail, almost like an Ouroboros thing of, like, Loki is actually the head of the TVA. There's a variant or whatever. There's a Loki running the TVA and keeping this ship running this way for his own nefarious purposes. So we know that she has the power to, like, trap everyone kind of in a fantasy. Maybe another version of Loki has a different version of that ability. It's a similar thing, but maybe it's more powerful and very enveloping. Or maybe he has something to multiply. That version of Loki maybe has a multiplier that makes it so you can have all these people under your control, keep them in this haze and stuff like that. Throwing it out there just based on some theories I've heard, and throwing out, kind of my own takes on those said theories. It's an interesting thing to think about. But obviously, Loki and Selphie are trying to make their way to the Ark. And actually, it's so badass. Like, it's such a, like... I mean, it's like literally an apocalyptic... Something you see in an apocalyptic movie. Like, where it's like, oh, it's a natural disaster or whatever. And, like, what was it? 2012 or, like, the day after tomorrow type of thing. But it's like the planet cracking and large chunks of it. Obviously, like... Chunks have been falling the entire episode, but, like, that was a massive break in that planet. And, it's like everyone's running, Loki and Selphie doing their thing, making their way through all the guards. And, once again, just the explosions and everything, I'm like, wow, it's just crazy. For one, it's like, you wouldn't think you'd see something as bombastic and, like, so, like, boom, boom, boom in your face. Yeah, like, I know, boom, boom, boom. Like, I know, I have a way with words. But it just seems so crazy. And it's like, all right, they're making their way to it, and the Ark ends up getting destroyed. And it's like, well, that sucks. And literally, you can see guards. Like, there's one guard in particular, you see him drop to his knees because everyone's stunned. It's like, the guards were stopping people from just, like, rushing and getting on board. And it's like, we're all dead. There's literally no getting out of this. For both Selphie and Loki, it's like, they're stuck here too. The device is broken. There's no way off of it. The only way you're getting off of this is if somehow Mobius is able to track you down. Because it's like, nah, I got your back, Loki. Because you are technically my partner and all this. So I've got your back, so I'm going to look out for you and find you and help you. But for now, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a very doomish ending to kind of leave it off of. I was like, oh, wow. It's like quite the pickle they found themselves in. So hopefully next episode we get a little more insight into Selphie and kind of find out what her circumstances are, like why she is doing all that she's doing, and obviously more answers about this TVA situation, because like I said, there's cracks in it now, and Loki is most likely going to poke at those cracks. Question is, well, we know Loki, once he pokes cracks in it, he's going to try and take advantage of it, especially because, like I brought up earlier, he's under the impression like this is the almighty power, but it's like, whoa. There's actually, wait, this whole thing it's fake, it's a fraud, it's a myth. The moment he finds it out, it's like, right, I think we're going to find Loki being like, you know what, nothing's set in stone anymore. If this is all BS, then everything's free reign. Like, that nothing's set in stone. Maybe things don't have to be that way. Maybe his adventures with Selphie will end up inspiring him. Like, maybe, like, she ends up dying and that motivates him to, I don't know. Because, like I said, it might be a love situation. Like I said, it's very masturbatory, but they are technically two different people. Because even Loki's kind of brought up, oh, he's never been in love. He's like, oh, yeah, there's been guys, girl, doesn't matter, but it's never been anything real, So that's why I'm thinking, like, this might be the real thing. It's like, oh, this might turn into like I said, complicated, a little weird love story in some regards. That, like, once again, it'd be interesting if that ends up being a route they go down. Maybe it's not. Maybe, I don't know. Especially like if they're, well, we're kind of stuck here and we're going to die, so maybe it might be a thing of, well, I'd rather go out, there's no one else I'd rather go out with in style other than me, type of thing, you know? So, just a lot of stuff kind of going through my mind. Like I said, I'm really excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, low light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.